Welcome to Real Estate and Murder, a podcast about real estate and murder.
I am Amy Brockbank.
And I am Sarah Brager. We are both licensed real estate agents in the state of Utah who have a common fascination with true crime.
We are here to tell you stories of murder amongst the real estate community. It might be an agent, it might be a client, it might be an undetected serial killer.
When it comes to real estate crimes, some are predators and some are prey.
We just want to issue a trigger warning. The content of these cases can be difficult to hear from time to time, and please listen with care.
Hi, Amy.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Real Estate and Murder.
I know it's been a hot minute since Sarah and I have been in the studio.
It feels like also it's 9 o'clock in the morning, which is not the normal time that we record, but we're very busy this week. So it's 9 a.m. We're here. I made it. We're fine. How are you doing, Amy? Good. Why don't you tell me, before we jump into our case, what you did in real estate this week? That's what we always talk about.
Yeah. This week, it's been a while. I'm getting ready to go on a trip, and so
I'm so ready for you.
of course, like all the clients, we always joke in real estate, like, as soon as you're getting ready to go out of town or whatever, clients will come out of the woodwork. So yeah, I have clients that want to list and buy, and it's been a little wild.
It's so true. If you're in the real estate industry at all, you know exactly what we're talking about. There's just this karma, just this weird thing that happens no matter when you're going out of town or you're on vacation. All of a sudden, everybody wants to buy and sell.
Yeah,
It's
or
the
even
funniest
just like planning when your like week is booked or whatever. You don't even have to be going out of town anywhere.
It's so true. And I will say that is one of the big benefits about the kind of business relationship that you and I have, is because there's always someone to tag team.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess unless we're on vacation together, but we still have, partners that can tag team with us and help our clients while we're out of town.
Yeah.
So, and that's a huge benefit of being partners and working together the way that we do.
It takes a lot of pressure off. Like, your business doesn't come to a standstill just because you have a life outside of real estate.
Oh, absolutely. And the clients that I do have to tell that I'm going out of town when I am are always so happy to hear that there's someone here on site in case they're needed. Like, they love hearing that. So,
well, and even because we often are using our cell phones or whatever, we can be more remote. But I mean, I've been in Cozumel on a dirt road trying to talk to a client who's listing, and I'm like, I might lose reception, but I'll call you back as soon as I can.
Yep, absolutely. I know the feeling. Well, I'm super excited for you to go on your trip. But as a part of that, we're like, okay, we got to bang out some episodes and make sure that we're prepared, because we also have the holidays coming up.
Yes.
So we both spent some time yesterday, the day before, preparing for this episode. And wow, did we find out a lot more than we expected, right?
Yeah.
So this episode is really, really interesting. But I guess let's kind of jump into this. Let's introduce the case. Are you ready for that?
Sure.
Okay. So this week, we are bringing you the truly tragic story of the death of Vern Holbrook, who was a beloved broker from Yakima, Washington.
Yeah.
Right? So for this case, we're going to be up in central Washington, which is where beautiful Yakima is. I actually Googled it to make sure I knew exactly kind of where it was. And the photos that you can see online are just so stunningly like classic Washington state, what you would think, right? Like mountain ranges, beautiful forests. There's water also, like valleys. There's a lot of agriculture. So there's a lot of fruits, vegetables, hops, a lot of agriculture there. So it's really beautiful kind of countryside Washington.
Yeah.
So that's Yakima. That's where we're at. And as always, as we do, we are going to bring you the current local market statistics for the real estate market there. So when we do these statistics, which Amy's going to give us, just remember we're doing them as today's market, not at the time of our cases.
Yeah, and we're just taking data because we aren't the real estate agents that are in the area. So we're taking data from other sites that collect the data. So they might not be as accurate as your local real estate agent would have.
Yeah, but it's good information. We've learned so much about the locations of where our stories take place.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
tell us about Yakima.
So the median listing home price, which is the average price that a home goes up for sale, is $415,000.
Okay.
The median days on market, so the average days on market is 42. And for those that like to look at price per square footage, which is mainly public, looks at price per square footage, not really
Correct.
agents, but it comes out to be about $224 per square foot.
Which is actually pretty consistent with our market. I don't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah,
but
no, you're
that's kind of average with where we are.
Yeah, and that's according to Realtor.com, but Redfin.com had a few different stats. They had the average sales price, so the actual price that homes are selling for is at 367,000, and they have a different stats on days on market. And I think the differing is because we talk about those Pinterest homes, the ones that are like really ready to go and do. And so I think that those stats kind of move in a little different. But the sales to list price, right? So if you have a house that's listed for sale and what the possible of what the purchase price will end up being is 98.4%.
Yeah,
of
which
the
is also pretty consistent with Utah, honestly,
Yeah.
about where we're at right now. So 98% list to sale price.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the homes that sold above list price, those fall in about 21.3%.
Okay. Interesting.
So, but one thing that I learned, and maybe those in other areas, if you guys want to message us in and let us know, it brings up an interesting discussion. Is we've been hearing reports, and it's happening in a couple places here in Utah, where insurance companies are either increasing the price of the cost to insure a house, like so your homeowner's insurance, or they're outright refusing to renew the policies. And we're seeing it in California, certain areas in Utah. I know Florida's having some problems. So around the country, there's having some problems, but there was actually a climate impact report on Yakima's housing, and it said the fire factor is listed as major, and it's 88% of the properties are at risk of wildfires over the next 30 years.
Interesting.
So I'm wondering, with these new climate reports that are coming out, if insurance companies are using these reports to either offset their costs of potential losses for their clients or outright refusing coverage now, because we're seeing it kind of across the country in different like flood areas and things like that. The flood factor is minor. You mentioned water. It's only at 8% are at risk for severe flooding over the next 30 years. Wind factor is minimal, but heat factor is considered moderate. And it says 94% of properties are at moderate risk of heat over the next 30 years. And I'm not exactly sure what would constitute a heat factor, because I think heat factor and I think like Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah, exactly. The desert.
Yeah, Las Vegas, where it gets like super, super hot. But anyway, it was interesting and an interesting discussion too. I'm curious to see how everybody's homeowners insurance policies are changing over this new climate impact coming out around the country.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Did the insurance company write the climate report?
I mean, I don't know. That's a great question. And I don't know if it's a new
I have no idea.
it's a new like legislative policy, like nationally or locally. I don't know. Or if insurance companies are like, we're sick of paying out these large sums for areas. But I know in California particularly, they're just outright refusing to renew. I know State Farm pulled out. Not that I'm coming for State Farm insurance, but they pulled out. There was a big news report that they pulled out of the areas and have just told their homeowners, like, sorry, you'll have to find insurance elsewhere. But if you know anything about when you own a home, you are required to have homeowners insurance as part of your mortgage requirements.
Right.
And there's a clause in your mortgage contract that is due on sell clause, which basically says that if you're in breach of anything in your contract, the full amount will be due to the bank or whoever you loaned your money from. And
Right.
so it can cause a big problem for homeowners.
Interesting. So I don't know a whole lot about this, but now it sounds like we need to get one of the homeowners insurance agents that we work with
No,
to come in and do an interview with us.
I think so. It's very fascinating.
That's interesting. Well, that's Yakima. Apparently, it's at high risk for fire. So heads up, everyone out that way. But I'm curious to kind of see how that develops. And, part of what we do as real estate agents is we watch things like the climate and the neighborhoods and environmental impacts, right? And
Yeah.
so that's something we can keep an eye on and report back.
Yeah, if
Very interesting.
your agent should be able to tell you, if they redo the flood zoning maps in your area and different things like that. They do that every few years, and so just ask questions. Your real estate agent should be the local expert and,
Yeah,
figure out what's changing in your neighborhood.
very interesting. Well, thank you for that tidbit. Super interesting. Let's definitely bring on an insurance agent. All right. Well, we're in gorgeous Yakima, Washington, like we've said. And Amy just kind of went over the stats for the local market, which really actually play a lot into our story today because the subject of our story, Vern Holbrook, was a very active, very successful broker right in Yakima. And his involvement with the community is a big part of his story. So we'll get into that. But Amy, if we're ready to start our story, I would actually like to take us to May 25th, 2013. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. There is a real estate agent who works at Aspen Realty who is an agent under the broker Vern Holbrook.
Okay.
And he takes a phone call at the office from a concerned wife of Vern. And her name is Xin Zhao. Did I say that right?
I think so.
So nervous.
According to the internet, on
Okay.
pronounce it.
So he takes a call from Vern's wife who says that Vern has missed a date with her, which is very unusual. She can't get a hold of him on his cell phone, and she's very concerned. Now, at the same time that this phone call is happening, Vern has a daughter-in-law named Tara who is very concerned also because Vern did not show up at a nursery that he was going to meet her at with his truck to help her transport some plants and things they were buying. And so it's starting to kind of come up. The family's starting to talk, like, where's Vern? Where did he go?
Yeah.
So Javier, as an agent at this brokerage of Vern's, he knew how to find where the last appointment that Vern had would have been. And so he sets out. He's going to go to a local town nearby called Cowiche. We have some interesting pronunciations in this episode. I'm doing the best. Cowiche, right?
Yes.
Local community nearby. And in Cowiche, there is a home that Vern had listed for sale. And Vern was going to that listing to show to some potential buyers.
Yes.
So Javier goes to this property looking for Vern. And as he pulls up to the home, he sees Vern's truck. So good, right? At least
Yeah.
Vern's here or was here. So Javier approaches the house. There's no other vehicle on site, though. There's just the truck. So he approaches the house, knocks, nobody answers. He enters and sees Vern, sadly, on the floor. Vern is alive. However, he has been beaten and his throat has been slit.
Yeah.
Which is so, I don't know what other word to use, but it's so brutal. That's the good word. Yeah, it's just so brutal.
We should also mention to our audience that Vern is an older gentleman. He's 78, 79.
Yeah. Yeah, he was 79 years old at this time, and he is clinging to life, and he's been there for hours at this point. So, of course, Javier immediately calls the police. Police come on site right away, and they transport Vern to a hospital where he actually stays for quite a long time, and we'll talk more about that later. But that is the day. This is the event we're talking about. May 25th, 2013. Vern is discovered at one of his listings, and he has been beaten and attempted murder at this point. So, Amy, why don't you introduce us to Vern Holbrook? Tell us all about Vern. Tell us what you know about his background, and then we'll talk about his business a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, Vern was born on November 10th, 1934, in a little town called Tamarack in Idaho, and it's an Adams County, if you're familiar with that area.
I am not.
That's okay.
That's like small town Idaho, right?
Yeah. It's kind of near. So if you're, well, I don't want to give the wrong information, but I think it's near New Meadows, which is just like an outskirt of Boise.
Okay.
You're kind of familiar with that area,
Okay.
if I'm remembering
I mean, I could really say everything's an outskirt of Boise in Idaho, right? So you're right.
I mean,
But it's small town Idaho.
yeah. So, anyway, Vern was the son of Dell Clifford and Ida.
Okay.
And Vern grew up in this small town, and then his family actually moved to Grangeville, Idaho.
Okay.
And Sarah's eyes are like a little perked up because she knows like I have a relationship with Grangeville, Idaho, but we'll do a surprise Sarah segment here in a second.
Okay.
Stay with us.
So wait, so he moves to Grangeville, Idaho, his family. So he's still
a
young
kid.
Okay.
While he's in Grangeville and growing up, he ends up like graduating from Grangeville, and he's there for a while, and he meets his first wife. They're 18 when they get married.
Aww.
And her name is Rita.
Okay.
And we'll just keep it simple because we're going to throw a lot of names at our audience for this episode. And they have 2 kids over the next few years.
Okay.
They have a daughter named Jana, and she is born in 1956. They got married in 1953. And they have a son, Terry. And we'll just tell our audience, it's when someone passes away, we can have information on them, and when they're still living, we don't have as accurate information. Mm-hmm. So, him and Rita were married, and Grangeville is a really, really small town. Grangeville is like, well, right now it's only like 3,500 people live in Grangeville.
Little town.
It's
really
tiny.
Outskirts of Boise.
Yeah.
Outskirts.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have 2 stoplights now, which is pretty impressive.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Small town. Yeah. Where are we going with this? I'm like ... because I have no idea.
Yeah, in the middle of Vern's bio, should I just do the surprise Sarah segment?
You better, because I don't know where we are in Idaho.
Okay, so my grandparents live in Grangeville.
Okay.
And so when I was doing the research and saw Grangeville, Idaho, I was like, oh my goodness, I wonder if my grandma passed away a few years ago, but my grandpa is still alive. He's 93. So he's a few years older than Vern, would have been when they were growing up together or whatever. And so I called my grandpa and I was like, do you know who Vern Holbrook is?
Shut up. You did not?
Because he said, I know Vern Holbrook. He was one of my clients. My grandpa was a lawyer for years and years, and turns out he had all this information about Vern that is not available on the internet.
This is what's amazing about you, is the way that we both research is very differently, and you like to really find like factual data. And I in any of the sources that I looked at and read, I found nothing about his upbringing, right? And that's usually the stuff that I know you're going to find. But that's incredible that you link somehow that your grandfather knows the subject of our case.
Yeah, it was a wild, wild story. And I talked to him, and because we were researching kind of last minute more than what we normally do, I just had a few hours where I could, do the research and ask him a bunch of questions. And
that's amazing.
He went to the same high school. There's only one high school there.
I was going to say.
And my grandpa has like old yearbooks and just...
No way.
Yeah, like he was a few years younger than my grandma and my grandpa in school, so they didn't know each other when they were younger. But when Vern was a little older, my grandpa knew Rita, which is how I found out that he even had a wife named Rita, because if you look at all the material, Rita's never mentioned.
Yeah, not really.
She's not even mentioned in his obituary.
Wow.
So anyway,
Amy did the deep dive.
I know. Him and his parents had a oil truck company,
Okay.
like an operated fuel delivery business, kind of, in this area. Because most people in this area either use like gas stoves or whatever. So anyway, oil has to be kind of brought in or delivered.
Okay. Yeah.
Heating or whatever. I'm not exactly sure. I think they did all sorts of oil operating businesses, like cars, like whatever. But they actually owned two companies. Like one was in a small town of Elk City, which is kind of a little outskirts of Grangeville. It's 45 minutes. Yeah. And then one was in Grangeville. And so my grandpa on occasion would help with collections. So if they had clients that hadn't paid, he was the attorney that they would go to be like, hey, I need to do. And at first when I was talking to him about Vern, I said, wait, he was one of your clients? Can you tell me about it? And he said, it's attorney-client privilege. Fair. And that's bringing my grandpa some projects in here. But also, too, I was like, okay, well, I hate to tell you, but Vern has passed away.
No way.
So I had to tell my grandpa that one of his clients had died. So that was awful. But anyway,
I feel like this conversation was going great, Grandpa. Up until now, I'm so sorry.
No, my grandpa was like, okay. So he started telling me about the business. And he started going into detail about Vern and Rita. And I was researching as he was talking because I was like, I don't know who Rita is.
Sure.
And he's telling me like, well, if you find a marriage license, this person will be on record signing. This person was the deputy. This person was the clerk.
Oh my gosh, his memory.
No, he is sharp as a tack.
He is, yeah.
That's amazing. Turns out, found the marriage license.
Of course he did.
I sent it to him, and everyone he said would be on there was on there.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And we should note, just because we're talking about it, your grandpa, yeah, he was an attorney, he's a lawyer, but he was also a prosecutor.
Yeah.
So highly intelligent man and incredible memory at 93.
Well, and in this small town, you kind of wore both things. Like he was a defense lawyer that would be asked to be a special prosecutor sometimes.
Sure.
He started out in the prosecutor's office. Anyway,
that's amazing.
I've deep dived and asked him all sorts of questions over the years about. I used to go to court and watch him sometimes when I was little.
Oh, I bet.
It was like, this is why I want to be a lawyer.
Like, yeah.
I've always wanted to go to law school, but anyway.
Turns out we're podcasters.
Turns out I'm a wannabe lawyer. But, so back to Vern. And in Idaho, he has this business with his parents. He's a part owner, if my grandpa's remembering correctly.
Okay.
And
let's assume he is.
Yeah, let's assume he's just right. And my grandpa ends up helping. His parents are getting ready to retire.
Okay.
And he helps with he kept calling it the disposition of his business. So it's like the dissolution.
Okay.
So he's selling, and my grandpa knew all the information about who bought the business.
Sure he did.
All of this
That's
stuff.
incredible.
Yeah.
Your grandpa has 60 years on me, and I can't remember what I ate for dinner. That's amazing.
Yeah, his detail, his attention to detail is still...
Oh, brilliant.
Side note, I was talking to him about a few of his murder cases that he's been involved in over the years as a prosecutor or defense. And I asked him one time, I was like, can I go and do you still have the files? Could I read through them? And he was like, yeah. He's like, they're in storage, or I could just tell you, like, what's in them.
Yeah,
like, he knew
his memory.
The dates, the side streets, the addresses. Anyway, he's amazing. I love him anyway, but
you're right. Right.
Okay, so Vern ends up leaving Idaho after they sell their business.
Okay.
And him and Rita and their kids end up moving to Yakima.
Okay.
And I should just mention really quick, my grandpa spoke really, really highly of Vern. He always remembered him being a very kind man, a very good business owner, very honest in how he dealt with the public. And he said he was very active in the Junior Chamber of Commerce, which he says they don't really have around the areas. It's not as common nowadays as it used to be, but it was basically like a community group where you would serve in the community and you volunteer your time and almost like as he was talking, it reminded me of like the Chamber of Commerce nowadays.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was very involved and he volunteered, and everyone seemed to really like Vern and Rita. So
Wow, that is amazing.
I know. So Vern and Rita, they moved to Yakima. They are married for 20 years. It doesn't work out. Vern files for divorce, and a few years later, he marries his second wife, Nola May Jeanette Fox Holbrook. Like, she has this whole long name, but we'll just call her Nola for the sake of our audience. Nola had been married previously.
Okay.
Just for our audience to know, she has 2 kids,
Right.
sons. So just for namesake, Vern and Rita, going back, they have 2 children. They have a daughter named Jana and a son, Terry. Nola has 2 kids. They're both sons, Andrew and Chad. So when they get married, they have this blended family.
Right.
And Andrew and Chad said that Vern always treated him like they were his.
Right.
He never treated them like they were stepsons or less than or anything like that.
And Andrew and Chad are the ones that are featured most, I would say, in interviews that you would watch or listen to on material about this.
Okay.
Sorry. So his sons, we'll call them, show up quite a bit and tell their father's story.
And over the years, Vern ends up having like 12 grandchildren, 8 great grandchildren, like from these 4.
Amazing.
Kids.
Big family.
Yeah. Sadly, Nola ends up passing away
in 2007, I believe, right? After a battle with cancer.
Yeah, she fought cancer for, I think, 2.5 years. I'm not sure what kind of cancer she had.
Sure.
And Nola, they ended up getting married in around like 1987.
Okay.
And so they were also married like 20 years.
Right.
Really.
Right.
And then Vern ends up marrying Shin. So.
Okay. So I will say, just as a note, Andrew is interviewed quite a bit, and he does speak very lovingly about his mother, obviously Nola, and how she was just brought to life when she married Vern. How just all of this joy came out of her, and they were such a happy family. And that even when she passed, Vern still treated and included both Andrew and Chad as his children. Like, that didn't change. And so this was a very tight-knit, loving family that had to have a strong patriarch, right? Because we have a blended family, and now mom has passed on, stepmom, second mom has passed on. And so this is just a really strong family unit.
Yeah.
And then 12 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a little bit about, that's a lot about Vern's life. That's more than anyone knows. Yeah, which is amazing. I'm appalled, but I'm so thrilled that you found that connection and that there was so many good things to say.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, it's hard when you're researching these cases. We've had quite a few cases where we're like, we don't know. It's almost like the person's life didn't start until a crime had committed.
Sure.
And I just think that just does such a disservice to our audience and to know who this person really was. And so we both really try to get in the information, but little did,
Yeah, you got a home run this time. Yeah, that's amazing. Tell your grandpa thank you for sharing. And I'm so sorry we had to break the news.
I don't know. I felt so bad. We'll talk about that in part 2.
Okay. All right. So that's about Vern's family and his biography. So let's talk a little bit about his business. So Vern was a broker, and his business was called Aspen Realty. And as a broker, which we've talked about the difference between brokers and sales agents back in the Todd Kolop episodes, all the way back at the beginning of season 1. So if you haven't listened to that, definitely bounce back and listen to that episode. But as a broker, Vern managed other agents underneath Aspen Realty. And they were a very successful brokerage. As a matter of fact, for several consecutive years in a row, they were number 1 in total volume of sales in Yakima. So, which is a great statistic. If you're familiar with the real estate industry, to be number 1 in volume of sales is a significant marker.
Well, I think it just goes to show how Vern was as a business person, because he owns this real estate company, but he went into real estate completely different. And he had bought a few properties while he was living in Grangeville and things like that, that my grandpa remembers helping him transact or whatever.
Okay.
But like, he was in an oil delivery business. And then for him to go from that to full-time real estate with a brokerage that he owns and all of this stuff. And you have to work your way up to being a broker. Or at least you do nowadays.
Yeah.
You have to have so many transactions under your belt before you can be licensed as a broker. And so I just think that goes to his work ethic.
Yeah.
That he can totally just change his career.
Right.
And still have a second successful business.
Sure. And there's definitely an entrepreneurial streak that had to go through both. You have to be, have the natural skill set of being a good business owner, which he obviously had, because he had a very successful, sustaining business, both times, and a long career, because we know at the time of his death, he was 79, so almost 80 years old. And at that point, he was still working. His family says he's still working up to 60 hours a week, which is a lot. I don't even work 60 hours a week because, I guess truly, in all fairness, technology has changed the way that we work a lot in real estate. It really has. So it's not like I don't work hard. I'm just saying, like, still all the way till he was, 79 years old, he was still putting in many, many hours. But a few years before that, so in 2008, Vern had wanted to retire, and he was kind of doing that thing that all business owners do when they're ready to retire, where they're like, I'm half in, I'm half out. I want to be done, but I'm not quite done. So he decided that he wanted to sell his brokerage. And when that happens in real estate, right, you're selling the business, sometimes the building, the contact list, the client database.
You're selling your
different
name.
factors. Yeah, you're selling your brand, all of those things. And so there was an ambitious young agent in his brokerage at the time named Daniel. And Daniel had expressed interest in purchasing the brokerage. And that's not unusual in our field for an agent inside of a brokerage to want to purchase it. And Daniel had 2 brothers who were also going to go in on the business deal. And so Vern, again, like wanting to retire but not completely give over the brokerage 100%, had agreed to a payment plan with these guys where they would pay him monthly until the agreed upon amount was paid off, but also that Vern would stay on for a full year after the purchase to kind of consult.
Right. And a transition period. That's pretty common when you're selling a business. Like, here's the, because going from being like just an agent in the office to all of the admin stuff, that behind the scenes stuff that you don't see what ends up happening when you own a business, takes some time.
Yeah, exactly. So Daniel's last name is Blizzard, Daniel Blizzard, and I did not find the name of his 2 brothers, but they don't necessarily play into the storytelling. But what ends up happening is this deal just goes sour. It goes bad. Daniel actually doesn't keep up on the payments.
I think he only made 3 payments.
Yeah,
or
2 or
something.
3. So, and Vern continued to kind of extend the time limit and try to work with him, but ultimately the deal went sour. And
well, Sarah, let me remind our audience too, this is 2008. We're having kind of this market crash that's taking the nation by storm because of some things, that policies that were being made that on people that maybe couldn't have gotten loans to begin with. And there's a lot of fraud in the industry that was happening.
Yeah, if you're ever curious what caused the housing recession of 2007-8, do your own separate research. There's a lot of movies and documentaries that will explain Inside Job, The Big Short.
Yeah.
I mean, it was essentially set up to happen. So
It was a matter of when, not if, it was
Mhm.
gonna happen, and it
Totally.
ended up, but Vern, I think, initially was pretty understanding that they were, like, behind payments because there was a lot of foreclosures that were happening around the nation,
Sure.
and the market was crashing.
It was. But at this point, the relationship sours. And so Vern takes the business back because the payments haven't been made, informs all of the agents in his brokerage that their licenses are being switched back into his brokerage's name because that transition had started. And Vern is now back full time at it. So he was close to retiring and then ultimately opted not to and to continue working. Give it a few more years, see what happens, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that's really where he was at with his real estate career, up until the point that he passed. So, that business deal goes bad in 2008. We have the housing recession. There's some comeback, some recovery happening. Vern's still working hard. And then let's fast forward back to May 25th, 2013, which is the date of Vern's death. Well, actually, let me back that up. Sorry. And not his death, his attempted murder.
Yeah.
His attack, yeah, because it ultimately is murder, but he doesn't pass away that day. So just to clarify, we're going to refer to it in terms of his murder, but it didn't actually happen that day. He actually hung on to dear life for a few more months. We'll get into that more, but we're back to the date of his death. Vern has been taken away to the hospital and is undergoing pretty severe treatment to see if he can be helped at this point, and it's kind of unsure. His family it's touch and go. His throat was slit and there was a lot of blood. Now, unfortunately, I will say if you do go to look at any of these documentaries that are referenced in our show notes, of course, and the sources that we watched, just as a heads up, some of them do show crime scene footage, which I'm very unsure about my stance on that. Like sometimes I want to see it for factual sake, for information, but I also want to know that that's what they're going to put up on the TV screen. That's a little alarming.
See, I have a mixed feeling because you have all these loved ones that, will have those images are out there forever.
Exactly.
And when you Google his name or whatever, you don't, as a family member, I wouldn't want that to be like the first
Sure.
images that kind of
Yeah.
pop up on the screen.
So just as a warning, as a listener, if you're listening to this and want to go follow up on some of our sources, just as a heads up. But my point being, it nobody expected him to survive. They really didn't. The doctors had told his family there is no reason he should be alive right now.
Yeah, and there was a lot of head trauma from the
Right.
beating that he had taken place before the
Yeah.
injury to his neck.
Yeah. So the family's at the hospital with Vern, and police are searching the scene. Now they know the truck is there, and so Vern had taken himself there. There's no one else on site, and also one more thing is suspiciously missing. So given that we're real estate agents, Amy, what do you think the number one thing is that would be suspicious if missing from an agent?
We always have our phones.
We're always on our phones, in line at Disney World, on vacation, like
Oh
you
my
were
gosh,
saying,
yes.
in Cozumel, Mexico. So it was very suspicious that his cell phone wasn't on site and it wasn't anywhere in the truck. So immediately, this actually triggers the investigators who actually did an excellent job with this investigation, in my opinion.
Yeah, they worked really fast.
They worked very fast. They were very responsive to this. They immediately are like, this is a problem. That cell phone must be holding some secrets. There's no reason for it to not be here.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that they go do as a part of their investigation is they're going to find his cell phone records, and they subpoena, put together a warrant to get those records. And again, it comes pretty quickly because they really responded very quickly to this crime. So as this information is coming in and the investigators are sourcing his phone calls, it becomes apparent that there was 2 phone calls the same day of Vern's death, close to the time, and up until the last appointment that he would have taken.
Well, and everybody kind of knows because Vern let a lot of people know that he was going out to show a couple properties. They were both properties of his, I believe, that he was showing. And so he kind of had timestamps. I believe it was a Saturday, and he was like, I'm showing homes right now. I can meet, Tara at this time at the nursery, and then I've got this date planned. And so everything we've talked about timestamps in multiple cases, and kind of people know where he's supposed to go and how long a showing's supposed to take. And I believe he texts his daughter-in-law to say, you know, "Oh, hey, I'm just gonna run into the showing," or "They're running later," so the family kind of knows, like, what's kind of happening where Vern is and isn't, and so his phone should be on him.
Right. And so they track back where the last kind of phone call was that was back and forth, and it was 2 phone calls, incoming and outgoing, so this is obviously something we're gonna pay attention to. Um, and they track back and they find that the cell phone used to make these phone calls to Vern is being paid for by a woman named Adriana Mendez.
Okay.
So then that becomes the question, who is Adriana Mendez? Investigators ask the family. They've never heard of her, not sure who she is. Police can't immediately find her. There's no address registered for Adriana. They are kind of looking around, come up with nothing immediately. So now we have phone calls being made back and forth from a cell phone with one person in the location of Cowiche, where Vern was showing his listing and was found after he'd been attacked. So this cell phone is pinging near the location. So this is obviously something that they have to pursue. And after a little bit of work, they find out that Adriana is actually living at a local motel called the Sunshine Motel. Now, if you do want to go watch the Dateline episode about Vern Holbrook, it is called Secrets of the Sunshine Motel,
Yeah.
which threw me for a loop a little bit because I knew Vern's story, but I had no idea what a motel had to do with it. And it really doesn't, other that Adriana was living there. And so they go to the motel. This motel famously has a reputation for being, it's kind of a long-term living. It's not meant to be that way, but
Extended stay.
people live there long-term, whether they're supposed to or not. And it does not have a good reputation. We'll say it like that.
Okay.
So the police go and they knock on the door, and Adriana Mendez is surprised to see them. She is living there, in fact, with her 3 children.
Okay.
So they want to bring her in, and she very cooperatively goes. She's, completely unsure what this conversation is about. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking. What's going on? They get her to the station. And did you watch any of this footage or interview?
I
Okay.
did.
So it is, some is seen on Dateline. It is on some of the other sources. And it's very interesting to watch because they take her in, and the first questions they start to ask her is, have you ever been to Cowiche? And she says, yeah. Well, when was the last time you were there? She said, years ago. It's been a few years. Okay, immediately, first question out of the gate, the investigators know she's lying.
Well, and usually investigators don't ask, like, the simple questions unless they already know the answer.
Yeah.
Like,
Good point.
I mean, in FBI interviews and all these
Yeah.
they do, like, they already know the answer.
That's true.
How do you know so and so? They already know that you have a relationship with so and so, so don't lie about how do you know so and so.
That's fair. That's true. And they ask her, well, how do you know Vern Holbrook? Why did you call Vern Holbrook? Did you meet Vern Holbrook on Saturday? And she says, no, I didn't meet him. I talked to him on the phone. I didn't meet him. Okay, did you go see a listing with him on Saturday? No, I didn't. I just called him to ask him some questions about a home. Excuse me. So up until this point in the interview, I don't know, 6 minutes in.
Which could you imagine if you're just inquiring and then the police show up and they're like, so the agent that you were talking to.
Oh, yeah, that'd be scary.
Like,
yeah,
you're like,
we're innocent.
You're like, okay, let me produce receipts. Where were you on Saturday?
that's
Could you
true.
remember where you were on Saturday?
I don't know when Saturday was. Yeah, that makes me nervous. For sure, to think about being questioned about what I did like on a Tuesday 6 years ago. I have no clue. But she's obviously lying. She's outright lying. And interesting, you could see this moment in her interview where the investigator says, I know you're lying to me. Your cell phone pinged near Cowiche on Saturday after a phone call to Vern. So stop lying to me.
Yeah.
And over the next few hours, the investigators sit with her and start to wear her down bit by bit. She slowly gives up the story. And actually, at this point, Amy, we're going to wrap up part 1 because part 2 is going to blow your mind. on where this goes, how this all ties back. But what we do know up until now is that this mysterious woman who is lying about being with Vern on Saturday and has posed as a potential client of Vern, at least on the phone calls, she says, right? Knows something about Vern's death.
And before we close, I'll just let our audience know, grab a pen and paper to keep track of the cast of characters that are going to be introduced.
No joke, you guys. I told Amy last night I needed her to draw me a family tree. And so true to form, she brought a whiteboard and drew me a family tree.
And it's a big whiteboard.
It is a big whiteboard. There are a lot of characters, so we'll try and remind everyone of the names, but the way this story ties together, although simple at the end, is just fascinating, and deeply tied to real estate. So, that wraps up part 1 of the story of Vern Holbrook, Real Estate and Murder.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I will talk to you soon.